Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Salvage Workshop. If you missed part one, we had some great success getting this thing started and welding, and it was a challenge to get to the part where we could get it welding. Got a monster Red-D-Arc, and there's our Kubota diesel. I had to cut those out to get it out. Yeah, it's crusty down there. 2013. Well, the engine's not seized. Let's see if we get any crank. We do. It's already smoking. It didn't even have fuel hooked up to it. All right, here goes nothing. Now we'll crank. I'm turning the engine over doing this. Oh my, there is a massive nest in here. So far, we're not getting it to generate. Not connected, we've got stuff that's cut, we've got stuff that's supposed to go somewhere, but it's not. And I actually, the more I look at it, I think that might be a diode. This wire is on the wrong side here. Yeah, lots of cleaning, lots of tedious work. Let's get it fired up, and we'll see what happens. There we go, after a little bit of cleanup, connects up here. Well, it welds. Next up, I've got a whole list of things that we're gonna work on. We've got some gauges we want to put in, new belts, a key switch, manifolds for the exhaust, some light switches, gauges. I'm going to pressure wash it, fix the body panels, and we might get to painting. For now, I think the first thing that we're going to work on is getting it clean. It has warmed up significantly since that last video. I think it's like 45 degrees Fahrenheit outside, so it is plenty warm to be out there compared to the negatives we were dealing with. So this machine needs a pressure wash. All right, we got it totally clean. Looking way worse. That's how it goes, though. All right, I got it all hooked back up. I want to fire this thing up, let it get really warm, let it basically evaporate all of the water that I didn't get blown off so that we don't have any additional corrosion issues. Usually it takes much longer to create a problem, but I don't know. I just really don't like leaving water on, especially electrical components. All right, next up, I want to add some gauges. So I want an oil pressure and a water temp gauge to work. And I've got this old set I had laying around for a while. And the water temp gauge will go here. The old one, I actually already pulled it out and tested it. The water temp gauge doesn't work at all, and there is no oil temp or oil pressure gauge. For oil pressure, the plan will be, we're gonna pull out this oil pressure sensor, we're going to do some magic with brass fittings and essentially give us a T, and then we can run a little copper hard line to it and use that right below the pressure switch. So we'll be getting 100% accurate pressure as well as only using this one spot, so we have one location for potential leaks. There we go. Pull this starter out, and then we're going to get in that area. All right, I've decided that instead of getting this done right this second, what we're going to do is, there's not a better time than right this minute to paint this engine. And so before I start adding on all the accessories, you know, I can leave this off, I can get all this. We're going to take the exhaust manifold off, the alternator off. Yeah, I think I'm going to turn my focus actually on just prepping this engine for paint, because we're not going to do an amazing job. We're going to do a rattle can job and just, and it'll look 1,000 times better. As far as the silver goes, I haven't decided on that yet. If we do, I can pretty easily probably tape the engine off. I'm going to have to do the same for the generator, but let's get this exhaust manifold off now, and we'll start working our way around getting a few things off. And there's our broken exhaust manifold. Gaskets actually look pretty good. A little bit oily on that back cylinder, but decided I'm going to take the radiator off. It's 2 bolts and 2 hose clamps, and we just got to drain the radiator. So I'm going to try and save the coolant because it was full and there was nothing wrong with it. Got this little drain port right here. There we go. Looks clean and green. This may take a while. It's not flowing very fast. It'll save me some money, so I'm doing it. Ow! It happens. What's that? There we go. And that is what the front of our motor looks like. That's your water pump, that's your crankshaft, and there's all kinds of other accessory ports and stuff for different uses. This engine gets put in all kinds of different things, so I'm going to get this kind of cleaned up, wire brushed, and then basically we're ready to spray it. I'm not going to do it perfect here. It's going to be it looks better from 10 feet away, essentially. Or it looks better to you on camera, and if you were right up here, you'd be like, oh man, they're going to run right there. Or, oh man, you didn't tape this off. You know what? It doesn't matter. It really, really doesn't matter. Anything that I do is going to make this thing better. It's going to make it more valuable because, trust me, paint looking good does make things more valuable. Even if it shouldn't, it does. And so I just want to get it done. I don't want this to snowball into a full-on restoration project. This is a get it running, get it working, make it look decent, and then have it available so we could use it on future projects. So let's focus on that. My thought was, you know, we start adding all the other accessories, all the little things I was going to add onto this thing and fix and do. It's like, I'm going to have to take all that off for paint. So let's just get the paint done, and then we'll move on. So I'm having a quart of this Kubota blue mixed up at the local paint shop right now. The front and on the insides, I'm gonna do just a metallic silver on the inside. On the outsides here, I might do a little bit of sanding just to make them look a little nicer. We'll do some better work, hopefully, on the actual tins that surround the outside. And I'm looking into finding a decal kit for it, possibly. Worst case, we'll tape off these decals and they'll just look a little rough. It's okay, it'll be fine. But, all right, looking great. A few more things I'm gonna take off maybe and get all this ready, prepped, get a few more things taped. And we should be pretty close to throwing some paint on it. Let's see if I can straighten this out. It's kind of all wavy. What was that? What's this from? Oh no. Well, I just broke our switch. Wow, what a piece of junk. If that's all it takes to break it, dang. Well, I think I'm officially gonna scrap this idea and definitely put a key switch in, because it was like a $15 switch. Clearly not rated for salvage workshop use. Well, that makes me not want to hammer on any of this because I don't want to break all of it. See if I can get some pliers. Maybe we can... I don't know. I may take all the electronics off just to put a coat of paint behind it. Let's leave this for now. Ugh. All right, so I've decided I'm going to pull the engine off of the actual generator because this is going to get Kubota blue and everything else is going to be a different color. It is 5 bolts holding it to the generator, and then there's 3 bolts here, 3 bolts here on the actual mounts to the frame. It'll be way easier than taping everything off and trying not to get the blue all over the frame, and then later trying not to paint this, the body color. So that's what I'm planning to do. I was going to use my good old trusty shop crane here, this little engine hoist, but the cylinder has given up the ghost. I'm sure I could take it apart and rebuild down here, but I bled it, I added oil to it, and it's doing the old bunny hop where you crank it up and it goes up, 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 but never really gets higher than just a little bit. Usually that means the seal on the bottom is bad. I'm not even going to mess with it. I'm going to go buy one. All right, got a brand new 8-ton long stroke cylinder for my lifty thing. And I upgraded, I went to the air over hydraulic, which basically will allow me to not have to hand jack it, which, hand jacking. The nice thing is I work alone a lot, and so having the ability to basically be kind of near the engine and jack it up high by hand, just by squeezing this, is going to be a big help here. I moved the welder generator over this way a little bit so I can get around it. So let's get this hoist set up. We've got this leveler here. Squeeze this. Should go up. Yeah, much better. So these Kubotas already have lifting points on the engine, so we'll take advantage of that. So a load leveler, essentially it has this screw here, and you can change the point at which it tips, the tipping point, to make it so that you can level the load. You know what, I'm gonna switch this around so I can get that handle away from the frame. Got a little bit of tension on it. Let's get these bolts out. I shouldn't need it, but I shoved a block 2x4 into that side and the other side to kind of hold the generator. It does have its own 2 mounts here, but I'm just kind of worried it's going to tip this way. And even if it did a little bit, we could handle it, but trying to avoid that happening. So there's 2 9/16 here, 3 on the other side, and then 1, 2, 3 mounting here, 3 on the other side. Should wiggle free. We're gonna take this mount all the way off. Come on. All right, should be loose. There we go. Getting some separation. I better take off this. That needs to come off. I'm questioning whether or not I should do this. Oh, that always happens. All right, that is as far as I can get it. And the reason is there are fins on the back of this flywheel that are bolted to it, and I can't pull them through. And what I'm actually doing is I'm pulling the entire armature all the way through the exciter as well as the main generator. I'm gonna give up on this. I could take this apart and we could pull the whole thing out as one unit. I'm not really that concerned about it. If I had rattle cans, I would do this whole thing in, but I had to buy a quart of paint. I got it mixed up and sprayed out of a gun. I'm gonna put it all back in, but I do need to take these brushes out so that they don't get broken on the way back in. So I'm gonna work on that now. It's not easy to get back in there. So I've got longer bolts than what I need, and I'm just able to get them started, slowly working them in, getting it all lined up. Now go to the other side, do these two. So one of the other reasons I really want to get this together and not take it apart is to get it out, I have to take everything over here apart. And this machine runs and operates, and I really don't want to tear that far in. I didn't even want to go this far. Now I'll pull out these longer bolts. One by one, we'll place them with the originals. Well, as always on this channel, not everything goes as planned. I made a ton of work for myself, but I did learn the right way to take it out and have decided not to. So you do this kind of stuff with, you know, like I don't know every one of these machines inside and out. I do my research as best I can, but you're gonna fail. You're gonna have situations where you don't do everything right. And this is one of those situations where I didn't do everything right because I didn't know everything. But one important thing to know when you're doing projects one important thing to know when you're doing projects like this, you have to trust your gut. If your gut is saying, if I smack that with a hammer one more time, something is going to break, you have to listen to it. And if you don't listen to it, something is going to break. And that's kind of where I was with this. I was prying, trying to get it out, and didn't realize we're pulling the whole entire shaft throughout the whole engine and both of the generators, the exciter and the actual generator. And had I kept going, I would have destroyed quite a bit. Did a little more research on how it actually went together and figured it out. And I decided, since this thing runs and operates and all we're doing is putting lipstick on a pig here, like, let's just tape it off, put it all back together, and leave it as it is. I don't want to mess anything up, just trying to get a little bit of potential paint that I might get on the silver or the blue. So, you know, I really encourage you to trust your gut. If you feel like everything's going great, you know, then keep going. If you just have that little thing in the back of your mind saying, maybe we should stop, maybe I should look it up, maybe I should call someone, you got to trust that. That is literally your intuition telling you that there's a problem. And that has gotten me a long ways in the ability to figure out problems on all this old machinery that I own without destroying it. Sometimes you destroy it anyway, even when you do listen to your gut. And so you got to be able to roll with the punches. This didn't go as planned. Whatever. We'll move on. We'll get it painted. It'll still look awesome. And nobody will be the wiser, except for you, because you just saw the problem happen. So get this put back together, and we'll start getting taped off and ready for paint. All right, well, now we got it all taped off. So these are massive cardboard pallets that you'd put together and fold into a pallet or a cardboard box that would fit on a pallet. So it's a pallet-sized cardboard box, and they are very thick, like almost half an inch of cardboard, like 2-3 layers. They make amazing creepers. Put them under a machine, slide them to there like I used on the International truck. Essentially, I took one out in the field with me and was able to work on it. Or we're going to make a paint booth out of it. So I really don't want overspray all over everything. Hence, I did take some time and I removed some more stuff and really taped off the silver and the generator portion. I don't want blue everywhere. I don't want blue everywhere in the shop either. So I'm going to get one more of these, and we're going to create an entire, basically, container so that we can keep all of the spray, all of the paint in this. And then I did lay some stuff down on the floor like you saw. So, yeah, it's looking good. All right, here's our little paint booth. Got cardboard pretty much everywhere. Plenty of light. Air hose drops right out of the ceiling there, so that'd be perfect. And then I can close this when I'm in there and be able to keep all the overspray in here and not all over there. So, yeah. I am done for tonight. I'm going to head home and pick this back up tomorrow. So my plan was to paint with my good old trusty Harbor Freight paint gun. And apparently last time I used it, I did not clean it well enough. Lucky for me, these are the cheapest paint guns you can buy. I've done a lot of paint through this one. So I went to Harbor Freight and I bought the same thing. So bought another $12 or $14 whatever paint gun. Got it all dialed in, put some acetone through it, put on my gauge. One of the main things you want to do is you want to make sure you regulate it down to whatever PSI the paint requires 30 to 40 psi-ish is what I'm going to run through it. So we are going to be doing Kubota Blue. And I went and had this mixed up at the shop, gave them a couple samples. And I don't know if they pulled some numbers and got the actual paint code, or if they mixed it based on a, you know, an image. But if I could find spray paint cans and I was able to find them locally, I would have done that. This is absolutely not necessary that we're painting it with high quality shop paint. But it was the cheapest, and I could get the most for the amount of money I spent compared to, I think the spray paint cans were online 20 to 30 bucks a piece, maybe. So I can get more out of this than that. So let's get some mixed up. It's 8 parts of this to 1 part reducer and 1 part hardener. So 8 to 1 to 1 essentially. And if you've never used one of these, you basically figure out how much you're going to put in it, and then you go over here and there's a scale. Does it even have 8 to 1 to 1? I'm going to see if any of the other mixing cups I have 8 to 1 to 1. Alright, so I found one of these smaller paint cups and it has 8 to 1 to 1. So what you do is you mix however many ounces of paint you want, and then say it's 6. Then we add the next part. It can be either reducer or hardener up to that line, and the next part up to that line, and then you mix it. And it gives you the correct ratio of hardener paint and reducer to be able to spray for what we're using it for. And you can use all these different paint mixing ratios for different mixes of things. We don't need a lot, so actually this might work out well. What I might do is I might start with, like, I don't know, 5 ounces, and obviously that's going to get us a total of 5 ounces of paint. We'll see how far that goes. We can always mix more. So now we'll do the reducer, and lastly the hardener. All right, well, that should be good enough. I had to do probably 3 total coats, and I used maybe half of the cork. So we're gonna let that dry. I'm gonna work on getting this gun cleaned up, get a few other things kind of cleaned up. We'll let that set up, and we'll start working on probably the tins. All of the outside covers and everything that are silver, they all need work as far as straightening and sanding, and we'll do a little body work on a few pieces. All right, check it out. Got it painted. Looks pretty dang good. Had a few little drips and things like on this oil pen here that I kind of just waited till they were a little tacky and then rubbed my finger on. But definitely had to get on all the nooks and crannies, had to use a little flashlight to shine up and try and get everything. Really would have been better if I'd been able to take it out of the machine and, you know, have it hanging higher, and then I could kind of get below. I did struggle getting in the bottom of the oil pan and some of that, so I may hand brush the bottom of the oil pan at some point. But other than that, we were able to get everything really, really well coated. And I've had the heater angled at this for a few hours now. We're gonna let this dry overnight. I'm gonna head home, hang out with the fam, and we'll be back to take all the tape off and start prepping all the silver and whatnot for its color. And yeah, looking good. Nicked it a little bit. Oh well. So what I need to do is I need to lift this up and get it off the blocks so I can slide this bag on it. So I'm going to try and bag the whole motor. There's the block. Now I can pull the bag all the way under. Now we'll put the block back in. There we go. It's a little dented up. See if we can make it look a little nicer. It's never going to be perfect, but it'll be a little better. This radiator cover is pretty good. There's a vent here, and there's a little bit of messed up there. Let's see if we can kind of straighten some of that out. All right, so my plan is to have all the body panels, this front cover, the rear, the top, and the two sides all sandblasted down to bare metal. And the reason is because this thing's had multiple paint jobs, and it's all kinds of cracking, and I'd have to really spend a ton of time to get all that paint off myself. I've got a buddy that's got a business that does sandblasting, and so I'm taking it to him. He's going to do it tomorrow. So I basically am stripping down this dash. I've got everything off it, all the electrics, all the electronic parts are removed. And there we've got our dash panel. We might be getting a new one of these. I haven't decided if I really want to mess, but for now, we can reuse it if we need to. I'll take off these two, which will get me all the wires there, and then we couple bolts here, couple bolts here, and this thing should come off. So have that sandblasted, and then we'll paint it ourselves. It looks very different. Hey, now we can beat on this, get it all flattened out, and not worry about ruining our switches and stuff. So, sweet. That's loud. That makes my ears hurt. Some IsoTunes headphones, I can turn my music on. Then I don't have to listen to you. Alright, so here's our grill. That's what it ended up looking like. I welded and grinded and bent as best I could. So that'll be fine for me. From a distance, you'll never know. But we got all the panels. So the rear, the front, the exciter cover, the two side covers, and the top. All of which is going to the blasters. They're going to blast it down to bare metal for me, which they'll just wipe out all the decals, and I'm totally fine with that. I did a bunch of body work on all of them. They all had little bends, little dings and dents. Nothing really all that bad. I mean, probably the worst was that in the mesh of the radiator cover and what we pounded out of that. Everything else was just like, you know, right here on the corner there was a dent and miscellaneous dents on the edges where things hinge, and these were kind of bowed, kind of wavy along the edges. I'm going to drop this off of the blasters and we'll get it back bare metal. So I don't know how good this tank is. It does have a little bit of diesel in it, and I kind of scraped the bottom. Let's see if I can bring some up. And there's a layer of this. It's like a tar goo. I think it's what this is what diesel turns into when it goes back to nature. So old diesel fuel wants to find its home, its original state, and it turns back into oil or crude. So the bottom is coated with that, and there's a ton of rust right in the neck here. I'm gonna do the old classic, fill it with some rocks and tumble it. We're gonna tumble it using the van. So I've got this jacked up on some jack stands. We're going to strap this tank to the wheel and then put it in gear. But let's get some rocks first. That ought to be enough. Tumbler. I moved it over to this side and I turned it so that the rocks can beat the bottom better because it wasn't really getting the bottom very well. So, time to do some sketchy stuff. Doo-dah, doo-dah. Check this out. I was down there scraping with a pry bar, and the whole bottom layer started to come free. See this? This is what was on the bottom. Just a layer of old fuel. Freaking nasty. For this next tumble, found a drawer of random hardware, just junk. Well, they're not junk, but miscellaneous nuts and bolts. Put a little water in there for good measure. All right, so I did not think there was a chance in the world we were going to be able to save this tank. I thought it would have massive rust holes in the bottom and it'd be all bad, or these straps where this basically canvas or whatever it is would have rotted holes in it. The tank is solid and got it snazzied up a little bit, got a little paint on it, but let me show you the inside. So I was able to paint kind of around there, and I kind of wire brushed on the inside, but if you see, there's still a little bit of surface rust down in there. It's been probably about a week or so since I did that tumbling, and I haven't put anything in it since, so there is still some surface rust. I don't know, do you guys have any good solutions to throw in there to maybe kind of clean that up? I do not want to do like a red coating. I struggle with those because the fuel tank coatings, if they're not done perfectly right, eventually start to lift, or they can. I'm not saying they all do. And I've heard horror stories of those things ruining engines because the fuel tank coating came off, started going through the fuel system, ended up destroying an engine. I'd rather find another tank than destroy the engine. I don't think we're in the boat of needing to do either of those. So if you have any ideas on suggestions on what we could throw in there that isn't ridiculously expensive, I know, like, you know, some of the rust removers like Evaporust and stuff, that would be great, but this is like I don't even know, 8 or 10 gallon tank, and that stuff is like $30, $40 a gallon. I would love to have that much laying around, but I don't. And so I know that, you know, stuff like I don't really want to do electrolysis. I don't think that's the solution. Vinegar, not a big fan of it. And maybe what we'll do is we'll just do another tumble. But either way, the tank is absolutely savable. I did end up buying, I haven't gotten it yet, a new fuel bowl that will hook up to right here. because when I was pressure washing it, I destroyed it. So I've got these ones I had in my stash, and this was the factory one. And the glass bowl, I don't know if it was already destroyed by the time, you know, I was pressure washing it, but the glass is destroyed. This thing is pretty seized up, and so I bought a new one of these. They've got it coming on the way. I would have used one of the ones I've got, but this is the only one that has something coming up vertical, because this is supposed to screw in from the bottom, but I would have had to adapt it up to this size because it's quite a bit smaller. I think that might be 1/8 NPT, and this is like, I don't know, bigger, 1/2 inch maybe. So even though I've got a couple different options of ones I had laying around to replace this, it really wasn't too expensive to buy one that was specifically made for this, and it's got the shutoff built in, and you know, I don't know. That's the route I went and bought one of those. We'll save these for a rainy day. I'll actually probably throw this in with them, the parts to it, because if I can find a glass bowl laying around somewhere, then, you know, I'll throw it in with my stash. I do have some extra glass bowls that don't fit any of them in the drawer that I keep all these in, but none of them fit this. So, you know, even though this is dirty, if I absolutely had to make it work, I could make it work. This would not be hard to clean up. It's just a matter of time and the fact that we don't have a glass bowl that's going to fit it. None of these bowls fit that. Totally pumped we were able to save the tank. I am absolutely blown away by that, because a new tank is like $1,000, and I don't even know, I don't think the metal ones are available anymore. They've only got plastic ones. Not that it really matters. That layer of tar, let me show you that. I actually saved it because I wanted to show you what it does. Look at this. I put it on this rag, but this stuff will literally peel off and take the form of any container. It's so weird. It's like putty and Play-Doh for big people. And I mean, I know this is so bad, so toxic, but man, that actually might make a really good fire starter. But yeah, I can now get rid of it because I've been meaning to show you guys what it turns into. And so this was just a layer along the bottom of that tank. And I think this layer saved this tank because water was not allowed to settle down to the bottom of it and basically rust it out like it does in a lot of different fuel tanks that I've seen and had to deal with over the years, because I haven't found a single pinhole or rust hole in it. So that is a blessing in disguise, which is awesome. So fuel tank, pretty much ready to rock and roll. All right, let's see if I can get these exhaust manifold bolts. I tried to get that one, it broke. It's fine if they break because it's not threaded into this top piece, it's only threaded into the bottom. There we go. There we go. Bingo. That's what we needed separated. You see all the broken bolts there. All right, got a little high heat engine paint here. Awesome. Look at all that dirt. All because I was trying to hang it by a wire. Screw it. We'll sand it later and then put another coat over that. But for now, let's just redneck this. All right, I got the whole radiator all painted. I'll put this shroud back on. I got the panels back from the blasting company. And there's like little pitting and things that, you know, I can't do much about, especially like on these side covers. So I'm gonna hit it with some 80 grit just by hand, kind of knock some of the high spots down. I might go over this with, I've got a 3M pad on the angle grinder. There might not be a lot I can do for some of the pitting here. It's gonna show through when I go to paint it, it's really going to pop. And I'm not going to do any body work. We're not going to put any Bondo on this. We are way beyond where I was planning to do in regards to the aesthetics of this machine. But I'm glad we're doing it, because if I didn't do it now, I never would have ever done it. And so it's going to look great. So I'm going to hit these real quick with some 80, and then we're going to get it set up to prime and get it all primed and drying, and then we can go to the color. All right, so my thought is to put the water temp, oil pressure, and our hour meter, which I happen to have taped off, right here on the dash. This hole here is a ground for some of the dash wiring, and there's nothing really in that area, and so it's almost like it's perfect. A lot of machines I've seen have it like right here, 3 gauges here. I've seen some people put 3 gauges up there. I think this spot's like perfect, because these early Red-D-Arcs, they didn't use this whole panel. A lot of the newer ones, the actual decal for the face of it goes down to this line. Why they didn't, I really don't know, but it kind of makes a perfect spot for us to put gauges right here, and then be able to still mount everything else up that we had. So I've got a 2-inch bit. I think you need like a 2 1/16 to actually get the right size hole. So this 2 is just slightly under, and I have a 2 1/8, but if I get the 2 1/8, it's just slightly too big. But it would probably work. What's this one? So the option is either I go a little bit big and not have to do any filing, or I go a little under and I got to use like a die grinder and open the hole up a little bit. All right, I've been looking at this, and this is the oil pressure gauge that we're going to install. And it's got, this is where the amp meter goes, but it fits that hole perfectly. And this is a little bit small. So I do think I'm going to go 2-inch, just because I can work my way up to the size real gently. So let's take and try and lay out 3 holes that are decently looking. I'm thinking something like that right there. So now I'll measure, and we'll set up a center line through all of them, and then we'll set how far apart they are from one another. But this gets us far enough away from the outlet and the ground screw. And I don't remember what that bolt hole was, but if I do use it, it's not covered by the hour meter. Yeah, something like that. So now I want to measure and make sure that the distance from this to this line here is the same on this end and this end, so that my center line is straight and even. A lot of times though, you can do a lot of this by eye, if you've got a good eye. And then I am looking down the center of this where the pilot drill is, and I can line up right where the middle of it will be. Right about there. So we're going to score a line. I'm just going to take my knife. We're going to score a line. That line right there will be our center line for our holes. Almost perfect. So clean that up, it should be good. Bingo. I think that'll look really nice. All right, I've done a bunch of work on this thing off camera. Some of it's filmed, some of it's not, but let's just do a quick walk around of what we have here. So we've got the radiator all painted black, got the gas tank cleaned out and primed, then painted back. Everything got primed and then painted. Some of the side panels here that are silver, got those there. Kind of got parts everywhere. And I started doing the actual outer sections. So we ended up using a rust preventative sandable primer from Tractor Supply. Never used it before, but I've seen people do it. It's a sandable primer. It's fine. I'm cutting it with acetone and putting a little bit of hardener in it. And so it's working out great. Got muffler painted, alternator painted, starter painted. The front cone around the exciter motor, I think I'm going to do it some different color, like maybe copper or something. It's basically what covers right here around this. Got all the electrical bagged and kind of hanging from my my retractable airline, which worked out really well. And then got this whole thing. This color is what is it? This color is bright coat aluminum. And so all of the inner pieces are going to be that color, and that's kind of just a, the whole thing is not going to be the same color. So the plan is, obviously, we have the motor that's the blue. All this is going to be the bright coat aluminum. Same with a lot of the other panels on the inside. I haven't fully decided what I'm going to do the outer shell in. Here's the front panel. Got it all primed. Got a couple coats of that on there. And obviously you saw we put the 3 holes in it for the gauges, because obviously I wanted to do that before we were painting it. And then I moved, as you can see, I moved my paint booth here, which is just a bunch of cardboard. Put some more plastic down. And here we have really the most visible, the most viewed parts. And so I'm kind of trying to take a little bit more time with these. And I've done the insides of them. So this is the inside of the 2 side panels and the inside of the top cover. I'm going to let that dry overnight. We'll flip it, and then we'll do the outsides. Get them primed. But they look really nice. The paint went on well. It covered evenly. I don't see any runs. But yeah, I am totally pumped. And you can see kind of like there's some little dents and things there. I did my best to bodywork some of that out, but I was not going to spend a ton of time. Like right here, see if I can, get right there. See that? There was a crease right there that I pounded out and made better. But, the right angle, you're going to see a lot of it. We're not going for a show pony here. We are going for a much nicer, better looking welder generator, and I think that's what we're going to achieve. We'll decide on the color. Initially, I was thinking of spraying the whole outer shell an aluminum color, basically go for a silver, and I had aluminum, and then I bought another can of it, and so basically this is just straight aluminum. This color usually is a little bit more of a dull flat color, unlike the bright coat aluminum that we ended up going on all the inside stuff. So I don't know. I'm really debating, because obviously this thing was silver to begin with, and that's what the original company color uses. But we don't have to restore it to the way they had it look. So I'm going to do some thinking on that tonight and kind of decide what I want to do. Maybe we'll go to the paint shop and get some really cool color. I don't know. Like I've said before, we're snowballing into all kinds of other stuff. But one thing we're going to do is a lot of these little nuts and bolts, all these little hardware screws and everything that hold everything together, this is how I paint them. I pop them into a box, like these 6, and we prime and paint them, and then that way, when we go to install it, it looks better. Yeah, it is starting to really come along and look nice. Can't wait to be done painting and cleaning and sanding and banging out dents, and we're getting close. So far so good. We're coming along here. and a long ways from the scrap metal pile that I pulled out of Mike's junkyard. And I know he hasn't seen it yet, but when he does, he'll be floored by it. He'll be like, I can't even believe that's the same one. So I can't wait to show him. But you guys have a great night. I'm gonna go hang out with my family, and I will see you very soon. I decided on a much better color than silver. It is a metallic blue. And I think it's going to go well with the other colors we have. Silver and black. Let's see if I can do this without making a massive mess. Like I'm doing. I have one of those little lips you put on a can, and it pours better. I just don't have it here. So this is a single stage paint. I think it's going to be awesome. We'll find out together. Big shout out to Pig Products. They make amazing paper towels, wipes, oil absorbing products. They're a sponsor of the channel, and I enjoy their products, and I use it pretty much every day. All right, now we got our hardener. Well, it turned out pretty good for the most part. So I had a little bit of running and a little bit of metallic, almost like a flake fade. See that? And I can't quite tell if it's a run or if it's just the metallic fading, because I think what the mistake that I made was I was painting and a friend stopped by and I stopped painting. And I did not reshake up the mix in my cup when I restarted. And so I think in hitting this panel actually last, you can see a lot of those like run fades. That's definitely a run right there. That's definitely not just a fade of the metallic flake. And there's some drips here. I got too much on that panel, looks like. The actual top hood, it turned out actually pretty dang good. No real fades, no flakes. Pretty even. I mean, you can see some of the dents once we get better light on this. The rear radiator cover turned out pretty dang nice. There's a little bit right there of a run. I'm going to have to re-sand that panel. Probably this one and this one, and redo these three. But for now, we're gonna let it sit and dry. I like the color. I think it's cool. It almost looks like Miller Blue, which is funny because this is a Lincoln Electric welder rebranded by Red-D-Arc. All right, let's start taking this all this cover off. Before we go any further, I want to get these engine mounts reinstalled. And so this piece of rubber goes right there between. So right now, I need the whole engine to come up probably 3/4 of an inch to an inch. So I've got a little bottle jack down here. Let's see if I can get the height I need. A little more. Right about there. Here's our bolts and washers. There is our blue, and it looks pretty dang good, actually. There's like a little bit of a run right there. I might be able to sand that out if I cared enough. A little bit of a run, little drips there. But the other panel, it had quite a bit more drips. It had some along this edge here. It had some in the middle there. And then the worst was kind of right in this area. And so I've already sanded this down, and there were some up top there. I've already sanded this down and scuffed it with the Scotch-Brite. As much as I do like this color, the problem is that this is way too close to Miller blue. Miller Electric makes welders, and I don't want this necessarily confused for a Miller. Now, any blue is probably going to basically make you think Miller, but I did take the paint back. I had about a half gallon or so, maybe a little bit more, and we tinted it much darker. I wanted more of a navy type blue. So in order to change the color, I'm going to do one more coat over this, but we need to scuff it down to basically like this, and I've already done Scotch-Brite on these two panels. What we have left is this hood, the rear cover for the radiator, this side panel here, and the little door for the battery cover. And so I think what I'm going to do, instead of painting them hanging like this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay them face up on these sawhorses out here, and then I'm going to paint the tops and the faces like that, because I'll have a lot more control over getting the paint to lay evenly on that surface and not worry about runs. And then we'll let that set up for like 10 minutes or so, and then I'll take it off the sawhorses, hang it back up here, and then we'll swing around behind them and spray the backs, because I'm much less concerned about an issue on the back of the panels compared to the outside. The outside's what's going to get seen. Now, this is no show pony. I mean, there's dents and dings. Even there's a pretty good size, well, kind of one right in that area. But I do want it to look as nice as I can get it for what I'm doing and the amount of time I've spent. So let's get these scuffed up and ready, and then we're going to tack cloth everything, blow them all off, and then get the paint mixed up. So kind of a bummer that I didn't get it right the first time, but my thought was, since I had to go and I had to deal with the runs on a couple panels, there was actually a run right here. I might as well change the color, get it darker, make it something that I actually like a little bit more. So that's what I did. So I don't know if you've seen this tool, but this is essentially a little utility knife blade that has a little screw that puts a little bend in it. And what you do, you use this to try and blade off a drip. So we've got a drip here and a drip here. And you kind of want to start as shallow as you can and get a bite. Put this thing flat. See, that doesn't even touch it. So put a little bit more bend in it. Still not. There. So now, if I run this right over that, it should start cutting it. And it does. see if I can pull it out and show it to you. What we've done is shaved off a portion of that drip, and it'll make it easier to sand out. So we'll do, that one needs a little bit more. A little bit more bend. Might have gone a little bit too deep there, but you get the idea. I'll sand that out, and you won't even ever know there was a drip there. Slice the drip off the bottom there. All right, check it out. So I got the panels all painted, and man, I like this dark blue a lot better. And we were able to get through painting with not a single drip. It looks 1,000 times better than it did before. And we've gone 10 miles beyond where I was planning to go in getting this thing going. But tank, radiator, ready to rock and roll, and check this thing out. I think between the black, the blue, and the silver, we're gonna have a pretty cool looking little welder generator. And so, yeah, a few things to clean, and then we're gonna start getting it all assembled. But I think for right now, to actually start to assemble some of these pieces here, I need to get the front panel back on. And so that is what we're gonna work on now, so we can get that ready to rock and roll. Starting to get this dash panel kind of set up. This is where our toggle switch was, and I want to put our little light bulb there. So I got to open up that hole big enough for this. Well, there's the panel that covers this, so I should have done this before we painted. I didn't. So we're going to open it up with a step bit. Bingo. So now this will go right like that. And that'll be the light that tells us that our ignition is on, which will be very useful because we're going to replace the toggle switch for start and preheat with a key switch. See how this dash is going to look on here. Yeah, that looks good. I like it. So I haven't been able to source a new dash panel, so we're going to reuse this for the moment. And if I can find one later on, it's easy enough to swap out. So far so good. I like the way it looks. But I got some other things to do. I need to drill this hole bigger for the actual key. And so I'm going to go ahead and take this off, and we'll put this on later. Here's the key switch that I'm going to use. It is long, and not really loving it, but it is the best one that I have. I put the fuel tank in just temporarily. That's about where it sits. And so this thing, once it's flush in there, it's going to be about like that. So it's going to be kind of close, but I can have the wires come straight up and down, so that should be okay. Plus, the hole is this one right there. So actually, we've got plenty of room. I think that's going to work fine. I was looking at it up here, but the hole for the key switch is going to be right here. And then once it goes in, it's got another probably 3/4 of an inch that it'll come this way once the hole's big enough. So let's get that hole drilled, and we'll get this mocked up. Almost there. And get a little die grinder, and we ought to be able to clean that up. There we go. There we go. That's how it's going to look. The panel on, the new key switch is installed, the light is installed, outlet, couple breakers, the glow plug. Here's our amp meter. I might have to take a die grinder and just gently go around that because the paint buildup is making it not fit. Perfect. I kind of like the old cracked up dash. What do you think? Beautiful. Hour meter, and then oil pressure, water temp. One of the two of them will go there. All right, check it out. So these are replacement studs for being able to attach the welding leads to. And we saw before that this welding lead for the red was just coming right out of the motor, and the ground one was just kind of like dangling here. And so I extended this one, so now we can safely get to this side. And the way it works is you basically put this in here. There's two little knobs, and then you twist it like so. And on the back side, there's two screws that go through and screw into here and here. So we're going to get that done. And then this is basically a little attachment that will allow me to leave this here like that. And then I can insert and twist my welding leads and then quickly and easily detach them, but yet leave that in there. And then when the side cover's on, it's not going to contact anything. So it'll be nice and safe and also quick and easy to be able to set up. So I'm going to get these installed. Keep moving. And I made this shorter little welding lead. It's going to go from here to the ground. So I've been digging around, and I finally think I figured out what this wire that had been taped up and kind of shoved down in underneath the cover of the exciter is for. I think this wire is the other side of a 220 volt outlet. I don't know if Red-D-Arc did that when they were basically making this more simple, or if that came from factory from Lincoln. So we've got a 120 volt outlet here, and I think if I run this wire to one side of a 20 amp 250 volt outlet, and I run a jumper from the outlet where it's getting the other 120 volts, and I jump it to the other side of this, I think I'll be able to have an outlet for 250 volts. And so, or 220 or whatever the, it turns out to be. So right here, there's a hole. Well, there was a plate on the inside that was spot welded covering the hole. You could see the hole from the outside, but it was basically not being used. So I went looking for a black outlet because I want to find a black one to match this. But for now, I do have this white one. And basically, it's just going to go right in here, like so. And I tapped these holes to fit these cap head screws. I'm going to get this installed, and then I don't have everything all put together, so I can't actually start it up and test it to make sure. Here's another thing I thought was pretty cool. On the exciter, 54720. Main generator, 54720. So here on the engine, the serial number for it is V1902, which is our engine model, Kubota number, 54720. And then right on the dash, we've got 54720 AC. So this is a completely numbers matching machine. I think that's pretty cool. So it would be really nice if I had a new dash panel to be able to replace this with. But I kind of think I like the old decal, kind of with all the cracks in it. You know, it's got the original serial number in it. Everything else is brand new and looks great. And this just kind of adds to the age for me personally. Now, all of these 5, there's 6 bolts that hold this panel to the actual front cover. And they used to all look like this. Just a little self-tapper. Well, I had a bunch of these stainless cap screws, and so I've installed 5 of them. And I think for me, it's the little things that set something off, the little things that make it, you know, really look nicer. And so I decided, since I have them, why not take these out? Even though I painted them black and they did look nice, we've got a new cap head screw and then these little trim washers. I think it sets it off, kind of covers up some of the area where the actual sticker decal was destroyed over the years. But for me personally, I like it. So let's install this last one. Alright, so now I'm finally back to installing the oil pressure switch. This is what it basically looked like. It came straight out of the block, and it was right next to the head, right next to the exhaust manifold. And this oil pressure switch is essentially what gives power over to the Murphy switch, which I'll explain that later. The Murphy switch is part of the water temp gauge, which is bad. I think this might also be bad because we were getting really weird reading on the ohm rating when we actually put pressure to it. It did test as far as like the circuit did close, but I have another one and I tested it and it works way better. So because I have one, we're going to replace it. But what we're also going to do is instead of just going straight out of the head, or actually it's the block like this and up, this will allow me to get further away from the exhaust manifold, still get the electrical connections on, and then the little T here gives me the ability to run a copper line from this fitting to the gauge that's going to be on the front panel. So not only are we getting the ability to add an oil pressure gauge that we can monitor the oil pressure, but we're also pulling it a little further away from the actual machine, which means that this thing's not going to be subjected to as much heat as it was before. And I don't know anything about the machine before, why they chopped out all the safety stuff. Maybe this was bad. We really don't know. Even the few times we've run it, it really hasn't mattered because the machine doesn't need it to run. It only needs it to override the safeties that were already bypassed. And so, you know, whether or not this thing works perfect or not, we don't know. But because I have an identical one, I mean, it's the same part number and everything, just new old stock sitting around, we're going to use this one. But this is the setup that's going to go in there, and I would put it all together here. It's all just loose. But I have to install every single piece on the machine because none of it will fit together beforehand and then just thread in. So we're going to get this thrown in now and work our way towards getting that dash panel all fully outfitted with everything. So. All right, there we go. So there's our little T, and this will be where the oil temp or oil pressure sensor, not a temp sensor, will be, which it was like right in that corner, really close. Maybe it overheated at one point, who knows. These are some of the wires that are going to go to it, but I moved the hour meter from right here to the front panel, and the replacement water temp sensor is not going to go over there anymore. It's going to go on the front panel as well. So there's a few of these wires in here we have to pull back through and bring them just to the panel. I'm going to work on that now. These are going to the starter. We've got the alternator hooked up. That's 2 wires. But I ran a new wire that goes from here, this panel, to the hour meter. It had one that stopped right about here, and instead of basically adding a chunk on, I went ahead and pulled a brand new wire through. Let's make sure that the exhaust manifold doesn't hit it. Okay, good. Plenty of room. And now, let's grab the starter. Beautiful. So now the starter fits fine, and this is far enough away that it's not going to hit the starter or the exhaust manifold or the side cover. So almost a perfect little spot for that. And a little bit further away from the heat. Let's pop this oil gauge in here. Probably should get a better one than this, but it's one I had. Should have taken this off earlier. Would have been easier. Oh well. A little struggle never hurt anybody. Certainly has never hurt me. We're going to get this shut-off solenoid installed. Basically, it's going to go right, use this bolt here. It's going to go right like that. And then we'll have a line coming here to the injection pump and from the fuel pump to the shut-off solenoid. I want as little space between the shut-off and the injection pump so that when this gets shut off, it has to use up the fuel in the injection pump and then in this line before it actually does its job and shuts the engine off. I wish I had the type of shut-off that would just pull a solenoid back like this. And if that was the case, it'd just immediately shut it off, just like it does when we pull the rod. That's an option in the future if I decide to upgrade. But for now, we're going to go ahead and get everything wired up the way and set up the way it was originally designed. We're not going to put that Murphy switch, the actual water temp switch, back right here. And so I kind of did some reconfiguring on the fittings on this thing, as well as the location to put it. Bent the bracket a little bit. So I'm thinking right about there. All right, we're going to do all new fuel lines on this. These little covers I had on there off. Let's go ahead and do all right, so we're going to have one more fuel line, like I said, coming from the fuel tank down to the fuel filter housing through the filter up to the fuel pump to the shut-off solenoid right into the injection pump. I like how that looks. It definitely turned out nice and clean. looks professional. I might shorten this line, you know, maybe just slightly to bring it in a little tighter that way. But other than that, I'll get these tightened down and we'll keep moving through this. We're going to really dive into trying to get the wiring figured out because I've got to change some of these wiring. Like the wiring that went to this old Murphy gauge, this water temp sensor, doesn't need to come here anymore. But it does have to come to the wire for the shutoff solenoid. So I need to essentially pull out a couple wires because they're going to go to the front panel. But there does have to be one wire that has to come to here to give this power so that it can allow fuel into the engine. So this thing is the little water neck hose that's supposed to go from the thermostat housing over into the actual water pump. And the rubber's probably fine, but it just looks rough. I didn't even look online to try and see about getting a new one. I did find this at the local parts store. So the plan will be to chop out the parts we don't need. And it looks, I thought this hole was going to be too big, but it actually seems, it is slightly big, but with a hose clamp on there, it's going to be fine. And both sides, this side's actually a little tighter. It's got a little bit of a bigger lip on the top there, but there's enough of a clamping area that I can get this full band on both of them. So let's make this fit. So if you ever need a hose like this and you can't, I don't know, either one, you can't find one or you don't want to go waiting online, just go to the parts store and ask them to go in the back and take a look at the radiator hoses that they've got on the shelf. 9 times out of 10, honestly probably 10 times out of 10, they're like, sure. So I walked back there and I just looked for anything that was close to this bend. Take your other part with you. And they didn't have a problem letting me look through and find one, because to them it doesn't matter. They don't care that you're going to use it for something that it's not made for. They want to sell you the part, period. So that's what I did. I found this. This is literally the only thing they had. But the thing about it is the reason you want to find something with a pre-bend in it is that if you put a straight piece of hose, even though it's short, the shorter, actually, honestly, probably the worse, what'll happen is it'll kink like that. And then you won't get the flow that you need going through there. So you don't want that. You want full flow all the way through. So let's see what we can do. Where did this go? See, it went like that. So cool. I think that'll work perfect. These hose clamps in there. We'll find out if it seals. If it doesn't seal, I'll go find another one. I'll go either order something online or go to another parts store and see what they have. But for now, I'll hang on to this piece. But I think it should be fine. I'm going to remove all this old plastic sheeting because we're going to use different stuff and I got to move some wires and this is really getting in the way. And there's a few wires like this green wire I'm going to replace with a different wire. Throw a couple zip ties at these unions. Now we need to run a little copper line from the little, right behind the oil pressure switch, we put a little 90 in there. And we need to run oil, essentially, coming from this line to the gauge. Well, the kits usually come with this really crappy plastic tubing, which does work. But we're talking about oil coming right out of the engine. And if you care about the engine at all, don't use this stuff, because over time it breaks down, it cracks, and then you have an oil leak that could just completely destroy your engine. You let it run too long and you don't notice the oil leak, it's dumping all the oil out all over the place, and then it runs out of oil and ruins itself. And if you don't have safety switches that are going to shut the engine off, you're screwed. So go buy a little kit with the copper tubing, or buy actual line. I don't have any actual like nice made line that can go over here. So for right this minute, we're going to use this copper tubing. But what we're going to do, I'm going to run it through one of these. These are just chunks of old brake hose off of a semi-truck that I cut out and just hang on to. And the plan is basically to then label this as oil line. And then, so it's very plainly stated on that thing that that's what's going through this thing, so that, you know, anybody in the future working on it knows there's oil in that. So if there's a leak somewhere, you know, it might help somebody figure out where to go. I was thinking silver, but it's way too close to the color of that. Red, maybe. I'm kind of leaning toward yellow. I think yellow would blend in real nice. And so I think we're going to use a chunk of this, and we'll cut it basically to length there to here. And then I've got some shrink tubing that we're going to, once we get the connections made, we're going to basically shrink over this and over that on both ends, just to kind of keep water and debris out. Not that it really matters, but kind of the thought process that I had there. All right, so let's just kind of slowly uncoil this. I really like having an oil pressure gauge and a water temp gauge on anything, just because they're so important to making sure the machine is healthy. Go right about there. All right, let's cut our cover. And the point of this cover is literally just to protect this copper line and give it a little bit more strength and protection in the long run. Something like that. Right here is where I got the oil coming out of the engine through this little adapter. And so I'll take this cap off, and there's a compression fitting in there. That looks like this. So that we stick, first we stick the cap on, and then we stick the flat face facing the cap and the cone or the tapered end facing in there. And we'll feed the copper tube into the fitting. So the little ferrule, as it's called, basically goes in and creates a compression attachment essentially to the copper tube, kind of bulges it out a little bit and smashes it into this fitting so that it stays sealed. So let me grab a wrench, we'll tighten that down, and then we'll bring this up like that, and then we'll take our shrink tubing and we'll shrink tube over that whole thing, just like that. We are getting there. Till I sort out a new exhaust manifold, I'm going to put this one on here. At some point, I'm going to get a new manifold, but I don't have one at the moment. Waiting on some other parts for this machine too, so for the moment, we're just going to put everything together as we've got it and verify that everything still works, that we can verify. There's a couple things I broke. All right, check it out. Rear cover's all painted. Let's put it on. Dang. Yeah, baby. It's coming together. So I'm finishing the wiring on this. I added an ignition switch, so it's actually a key switch. A couple things we're going to test. I'm going to show you that the way that I'm going to power the fuel shutoff solenoid initially, instead of a momentary switch, I'm basically going to run power from the ignition switch. So when I click it over to start and crank, this gets powered because it only takes 4 psi for the oil pressure switch to build up enough pressure to close, and then that will send power over to the fuel solenoid to allow fuel to continue to go through the system into the injection pump. And I don't really want a momentary switch. There's still going to be a Murphy switch for the water temp. I don't have that yet. I'm waiting on that. I need an exhaust manifold. I need there's a handful of other things I need. A diode. We have to put a diode in the actual system so that once the alternator is running, it doesn't backfeed power, and then keep that safety circuit powered at all times. With the diode, it'll allow us to send power out on the key switch, but it won't allow power to backfeed once the alternator is charging. So I'm going to turn the key, and we're going to click it. Here's another problem that we have. When I turn this key, this should light up, which will tell us that this shutoff solenoid is operating, but we should also hear a crank. What's going on here? There we go. All right, so I'm going to turn the key. That powers up. And so you can hear the click, and I can feel it. That shutoff solenoid is working. On the other side, we're not getting crank. So the starter's got an issue. So I pulled the starter out, and I've been looking it over. The signal wire is fine. Our power from the battery is fine. So either the solenoid in this starter is bad, or the starter itself's got an issue. Not exactly totally sure. The only thing that I've done to it since before when it was working and now is paint it. The only thing I can think, see, I had to sand a little bit of this and a little bit of this to get paint off so that it would fit. I also had to do a little bit of paint removal right where in the hole where it goes in, because I painted it and it just made it just thick enough that it didn't want to fit well. Well, this one, I have another starter. This is a good one that I had extra from the Gale 4625 that has a 2203 Kubota. Same exact starter, pretty much. We could throw this in and try it, but what I actually think the problem is, I don't think it's making a good enough ground. And the reason that gave me the thought here is that this starter, from a while back whenever I tested this thing, I labeled it. This is the secondary ground. And so the main ground from the actual starter motor to this case is done through this lug here, which if you have no secondary ground wire coming off of that, the main ground has to come from the body of the starter, which would make sense. And that's fine. That's a totally fine way to do it. And that's how this one's set up. So there is no ground wire coming out of the electric motor side of it over here to this housing. It literally looks to me like it completely relies on the ground that is made by bolting it to the engine. So what I think is going on here is, in painting it, I painted over the locations it needs to ground on the motor. So we're going to clean out the bolt holes, because I see I've got paint in those. I've got more paint on the face here and kind of along the edge. And we're basically going to kind of clean up this whole thing to try and make it so that it makes good contact. We're going to put it back in. We're going to try it. If it doesn't work, we'll give this starter a shot. I don't think it's the wiring. I've been through every bit of the wiring. There is nothing telling me that anything's wrong with the wiring. I also don't think anything's wrong with this starter. Sometimes in situations like this, you have to think about what changed. What did you do from the time when it worked to when the time that it stopped working? And instead of thinking, oh, okay, all the wiring's bad, which I did change a lot of it, but I've tested it. What did I do to the starter? Nothing other than tape off this Bendix, tape off a couple of the wires here, and paint it. That's it. We cleaned it up a little bit and then gave it a paint job. So let's clean off some areas where I think it might need to be grounded, and we'll give it a shot. All right, let's give that a shot. Definitely a lot more metal visible now. If you want some advice on working on stuff on a pallet, just don't do it. It is a pain in the butt. Anytime you drop something like I just did, everything falls down between. It's annoying as heck and frustrating, because sometimes you lose stuff, it gets underneath. But sometimes it's easiest finding it like that, but not always. Rant over. All right, here's how our dash is looking so far. I would have the rheostat in, but to get this handle off, I was trying to get it off. I ended up breaking the rheostat. And so I am waiting on one of those to come in. Don't have it. The Murphy switch that's for the water temp gauge is going to go right here. That's what these two wires are for. I did get a different oil pressure switch, but we'll see if we use it or not. I haven't decided. I'm not sure if we need it. It's a Murphy style oil pressure switch. If we don't need it, we won't use it. That's coming as well. We're going to be installing a circuit breaker for this outlet. But for now, let's just see if we've got... All right, see, here's our light. So this way is for glow plugs. If you watch the amp gauge, it does move. This is on, right there. Come on, there we go. For some reason, this bulb is kind of flaky at times. If I turn it slowly, slow turn, nothing. And then let's see if we crank. That way we crank. Yeah, it was just the ground. I knew it had to be something simple. All right, now I want to check and see if that fuel solenoid stays energized once oil pressure gets built up to a certain pressure. The way we're going to do that is I'm going to crank it, and once we get oil pressure, because we now have a gauge up here, we should be able to see that light on this little test lead stay on after I'm done cranking it. So let's see if it works. Bingo. Light's still on. That, the oil pressure's coming down, should be turning off right about now. Yep, right there. And I know a lot of people said I should have kept that momentary switch in the circuit, but that's not how it was originally designed. That was an afterthought by whoever chopped it up and basically tried to bypass all that stuff. The momentary switch is not in the wiring diagram at all. the way it gets power to that solenoid, you do exactly how I did, but there's no key. So I'm pretty sure that toggle switch did everything. It gave power to that solenoid for long enough that it basically gave it time for the oil pressure to build up. Once that oil pressure was built up high enough, over 4 psi, it kept that on. So, therefore, to do what I've done, have a key switch, we need to add a diode. And the problem with the current setup, how I have it now, is once it's started and it's running, more than likely it's going to backfeed power from the alternator, which is also in the circuit. The alternator, the hour meter, the water temp gauge, and the oil pressure switch are all in line, as well as the fuel solenoid. And so if power is being generated by the exciter wire on the alternator, it's going to then backfeed all of the other systems. The oil pressure switch is really the key to everything. And I'm betting that might be the issue that actually caused the person that had this before me to chop everything up, because they couldn't figure out why they couldn't get a start out of it. And the oil pressure switch, when we were doing some readings on it last time, it was all over the place, and we were getting weird readings out of it. This new one that I had, it's working great. Great success. Let's just try it one more time. Put the key in. So once, and if I half crank it, you can hear the click. Half turn the key. I guess I don't hear the click because it's still on. The hour meter's still clicking. Oil pressure should be coming off any second. Now the hour meter should not click anymore. Beautiful. So now the hour meter shut itself off. So I guess it's now time to prime everything and try and get this thing started. All right. I am totally pumped that we got all those safeties figured out, and it's all wired up right. It's cranking. The start switch is doing what it should be doing. Now, not that I really need it, but I can pull the key and I can walk away and nobody else can start it. Unless they were just slightly smart enough to come back here and know what wires to jump, which it's not that complicated. I just like the fact that it's as simple as having a key, give it a crank, start it up and go. So I think next what we need to do is get the whole system primed with fuel, get the fuel system hooked up. We're gonna basically rewire loom all of the electrical wires. We're gonna put the finishing touches on, put it all together. There's a bunch of other miscellaneous accessories. We need to deal with exhaust manifold. We need to deal with the fuel tank. We need to deal with, I don't know, there's a bunch more. And that doesn't include a trailer or possibly graphics. I would really like to make this thing like a throwback looking welder. Some like old school decal, maybe hand painted of, you know, what you'd see back in the 30s, 40s, 50s by somebody in a mobile welding setup. Something you'd see on an old 1952 Ford or Chevy pickup truck, just headed out to the field, gonna go repair a machine for somebody. I don't know. So if you guys have any ideas on artwork or different ideas on what we could call this, if you have the desire to make any graphics, feel free to send me an email. We've gotten to the point where it's actually really nice now. I'm not used to this. But we're not done, and as much as I wanted to make this 2 videos, we're going into 3, because I really do want to also test on this thing. I want to go build something with it, or I want to use it to repair something that's, you know, a little harder to bring into the shop. And that was the whole point of having this. That was the whole point of, you know, trying to rescue it and get it to work, is so that I'd have something to take out in the field and actually use in a pinch. And I think it's going to be way better than just in a pinch. So let me know your thoughts. Tell me what you think of the transformation so far. But as always, I truly appreciate you guys sticking around and watching the videos here at Salvage Workshop. It means the world to me and my family. So thank you for your support. I truly appreciate it. You guys have a great one. And don't forget to get out there and try something new. You would be amazed at what you can do if you just give it a try. Take it easy.